Hello, my name is Linda Aristondo. Mi nombre es Linda Aristondo. I am a seminarian in the Episcopal Divinity School at Union Theological Seminary, located in West Harlem. Through the auspices of the Episcopal Evangelism Society, I was blessed with a grant for a project I named Virus, Violence, and Narrative Ministry. The program and the project sought to uplift the voices of people of color that were affected by the pandemic. We used as a locus St. Mary's Episcopal Church, which is located in West Harlem. My colleague Mohammed, Mia, and I went out to communities to ask them in their own voices what the impact of the pandemic was in their lives. The importance of this project was that I see too many people speaking about communities of color affected by the pandemic, but I don't see enough voices from the marginalized communities themselves. So we wanted to hear from them how the pandemic had affected their lives. We went to 3 different sites that were impacted, or rather that were uplifted by St. Mary's Episcopal Church ministries. We went to the food pantry lines, where every Monday people would line up awaiting food. Pre-pandemic, individuals would be allowed to go into the food pantry and sit as food was gathered for them, depending on the number of people in their families. Post-pandemic, people had to stand in line outside for hours while the food was brought up from the undercroft. They stood in the cold, they stood in the rain, they stood in the heat, they stood in many different weather conditions. Predominantly a population of women with children, older women, and senior citizens. This is one of the effects of the pandemic. Another impact of the pandemic were the number of people that we normally would bring food to that are living in the street. They are mentally ill and addicted, or one or the other. Because shelters were closed as a result of the pandemic, the shelter system closed for them. So there was a huge influx of people living in the street under the worst possible conditions, in the heat, in the snow, in the cold, hungry, and without shelter. We interviewed them as well. In their voices, they told us what the impact had been on them and their loved ones from the pandemic. A third group of people that we spoke to were the immigrants that are housed in the undercroft of the church. St. Mary's runs a shelter for undocumented individuals that are released from the federal detention centers for undocumented immigrants and have no home. So they arrive to our shelter where they are safe, where they are loved, where they are cared for. However, they also have stories about having lived under very non-COVID safe conditions while they were in the federal detention center. Some of them had already contracted COVID. Some of them told tales of their situation and the situation of their fellow detainees. The shelter is normally accommodating 10 people. Because of COVID, we could only accommodate 5, and you will hear their stories in their own voices. We uplift all the communities of color, wherever they might be, to acknowledge that they have suffered and will continue to suffer because of multiple reasons. 48% of the people who died were people of color. Of the $30.2 million that contracted AIDS, the majority of them were people of color. So we hope that this video and other videos will illuminate for you the role of the church as a central portion of people of communities of color, and how the church has and will continue to be of assistance to them.